Hey, what's going on, guys? Turdy Wordy here.
And welcome back to another Minecraft modding tutorial video. In this video we are going to be covering syncing our container. So we're going to want to sync our block entities data to the screen so that we can see it on the screen. And we'll be syncing integers because that's what we can sync. And this is extremely simple, so we need to sync things through our container. So I've already created the block entity, the block, the item, etc, as I have in the previous tutorials. And I'm doing a stupid thing in this tutorial, so I'm creating a poop storage, as stupid as it is, I know. And essentially we're just going to be displaying the amount of poop that is stored. That's basically what we're going to be doing. And in the next video I'm going to be explaining Blit a little bit, and we'll show how we can actually display something a little bit special. Anyways, let's get started. Let's come into our container. Now the first thing you need to do is come into our server constructor, and we're going to want to put in here a container data, and we can call that data. And then we're going to want to create a public final container data as a field, and we'll call that data 2. Let's initialize that in the constructor, so this.data is equal data, and at the bottom of our constructor we're going to call add data slots, and we'll do data, or we can even do add data slots. No, add data slots, just like that. Now inside of our client constructor we need to pass in a data slot, and essentially what that is going to be a new simple container data. So that's basically just going to be an empty piece of data storage. And finally, let's come down into our menu constructing method, and we're going to put in here a new poop storage container data, and this is basically going to need to take in a value. So the value that we put in here is the amount of pieces of data that we want to sync. So for example, since we only want to display one integer, we only want to sync one singular integer, and that is the count. Because of that, we can essentially just put in 1, because there's one piece of data. But let's say for a furnace, for example, you want to have 3 integers. So you'll want the burn time. Okay, no, you'll want 4 integers. You'll want the burn time, so how long that item burns for. You want the current burn time, so where that current sort of progression of the burn is. Then you'll want the smelt time, so that's how long it takes to smelt this item, and then you want the current smelt time, so how long it's currently at out of that. That would be for a furnace, for example, so that's 4 pieces of data, and so you would put in 4, but we just have 1. And we're also actually going to want to pass in our block entity here, so we can pass that in first. Fantastic. Obviously that doesn't exist yet. Now the thing to note is, since we passed in 1 down here, you're going to want to pass in 1 up here as well. So it's going to be that same value in this one and in this one. Now we're going to want to create this class. I've already created a new package inside of our container called sync data. And this is basically where all of our syncing container data will be. Now let's create the container data. This will implement container data. There we go. In fact, we can... Okay, that doesn't really make any sense. Let's instead extend simple container data. And let's remove this get count method. Okay. Let's import that, and let's add the constructor that it wants. and then let's override get, and we'll override set. Let's first rename this integer right here. So we're going to want to call this count. Will do. That might actually be a little confusing. Let's rename it amount. Okay, and we're going to want to store our block entity in here. So let's just do a private final poop storage block entity, and obviously that will be your block entity class, of course. And I'm going to call this just block entity, and let's pass that into our constructor as well. So I'm going to put it before the integer. So poop storage block entity, and I'll call that BE. And let's set that, so this dot block entity is equal BE. Great. Now this get method, this integer is the key, so we're going to get the key, and for the set method it's the key and the value. Now what you're going to want to do in these get and set methods is, for the get method, this is basically the data that will be stored at this key. So you can think of this class like a map. It has a map of key to value. Each key will represent a different value, and you can either get that value or set that value. So we're going to switch on the key using the new switch expressions, and we're going to say for case 0, and then we can use an arrow for this. We can say this dot block entity dot get item in slot 0 dot get count. So what this means is when the key 0 is passed in, we just want to get the item in our slot that we want, and then we get the count of it. So that's the data that I'm returning. Let's say you wanted to get your progress, you would just use like this dot block entity dot get progress, or whatever your method or field is called. Okay, and let's also do a default case, otherwise it's going to give us issues. So we're going to say default, and we can just throw a new unsupported operation exception, and we can put there is no value corresponding to key plus key in, and then we can put block entity. That's just what I like to do. Let's also put some just a little quote thingies around that, so we'll put one at the end as well. Be a little more readable in the log. And we basically need to do the same for the set method, except we just don't we just need to set it basically. So we can once again switch on the key. This time we're going to use the normal switch statements because we're going to want to do a little more logic here. So case 0, so if the key is 0, we're going to get the stack in the slot first. So we'll go a final item stack is equal this dot block entity dot get item in slot 0. Now, just before I continue with this, obviously, if you just had a normal integer value, you could just do this dot block entity dot progress, for example, is equal 5. Or you would not do equal 5, of course, you would do equal value. Or you might have a set progress method. So, yeah, obviously, this is just very circumstantial. I think that's the word. Circumstantial, probably. And then we can just do whatever validation in here that we want. So for example, we could say if the value is greater than 0 and the value is less than stack.getMaxStackSize, then we can simply do stack.setCount value. We can also say else if value is less than or equal to 0. Now if the value is less than or equal to 0, then we're going to want to actually set it to something else. So we can say list.blockin entity.inventory.set stack in slot 0, and we'll just do stack item stack.empty, I mean, not stack. Because if the value is less than or equal to 0, then we're just going to want to set it to an empty stack. We're not going to want to set it to the same stack with a count of 0, because that would be a little weird. And then finally we can say else if the value is greater than stack.getMaxStackSize. So if it's greater than 64, then we're going to want to set it to the max stack size. So this we can say stack.setCount stack.setCount, and we can say stack.getMaxStackSize, and then we can set it in the slot. So this .block entity .inventory .set stack in slot 0, and we can just put the stack. Great. What you might want to do here is you might want to say instead, so instead of making this final, first of all, we could say here stack is equal item stack.empty, and yeet this line right there. There we go. And you're just going to want to break, because now we need a default case. So the default, we're once again just going to copy this and get rid of that. Great. Okay, that obviously, it tells us that this can be replaced with an if statement, which of course it can be replaced with an if statement if key is equal 0. I'm going to leave it as a switch, and the reason I'm going to leave it as a switch is just because if you want to add to it in the future, say you want to add another 3 different values, then it's just a little bit easier if it's already a switch. So I just prefer to leave it as a switch. Make it an if you want. If you know you're not going to add any more values and it's only 1 or 2, then just leave it as an else if thing. But I'm just going to leave it like this. So we can close that now, and we can import that in here. And import hello. Thank you. And great, that should be what we need. So let's just quickly come into our screen and let's create a simple way to display it. So let's come here, let's go this.font.draw. Now obviously you can do whatever you want with this value, it doesn't matter what you do. But I'm just going to draw a simple integer. In the next tutorial, as I said, I'm going to be covering the blit method. So this method that we used down here, I didn't really explain it in the video before, because this is sort of a very simple use case for it. But in the next video, I'm going to be drawing a sort of progress bar, essentially. I think that'll be a little more exciting. So what we're just going to put in here, we'll leave that for a second. Then let's go put in a position. So I'm going to say this.leftPos +118, and this.toppos plus 75. And those are values that will make sense in a minute. 0x 40 40 40. Now, for the thing that we actually want to draw, we need to go ahead and get that value from our container. And the way we can do that is go int count is equal this dot, and here you might get a little bit confused because instead of saying this dot container, you'll see that doesn't exist. We need to use this dot menu, and that gets us our container. From there, we can say dot data. Actually, can we just use dot get? No. Okay. Anyway, dot data, and then dot get, and we're going to get it from data slot 0. Now, what you could do, and actually I kind of recommend this, so you'll see in our container data here, it's a little bit confusing because we're dealing directly with these sort of hard-coded integers. So for example, 0 is mapped to the count, but if you had like 20 different things that you were syncing, for example, this is going to get really confusing really quickly, remembering, oh, is this one this, is this one that? So what you could do is you could actually just create getters and setters for this. So for example, you could say public int get count, and you could just do return, you could do return get 0. And then you could have public void set count. You could go int amount, and then you could go set 0 amount. And I think that would be a little easier to understand. Oh, we can't actually call it get count. Okay, we can call it set stack count and get stack count in order to not override that. And from there, we can just use menu.data. Now the issue is our data, if we come into our data, we can see it's a container data. So what you would have to do is cast it, which is actually not going to work because our client constructor only has a simple container data, not a poop storage container data. So we can't actually use that, unfortunately. I was hoping we could, but never mind. Ignore what I just said, because unfortunately that's not an option. So we just have to use the actual corresponding value, and we can just put in count. And obviously it doesn't like that because count is an integer and not a string. So converting that to a string, we get the value we want. And we can test this to see if it works correctly. So let's just go ahead and run client, and I'll see you in the game. So here we are, everyone. We are in the game. As you can see, I've just placed down and made some textures for the things we've done previously. So we've got the jaws, we've got our chest, and this is our new block. So this is the poop storage. I've just put poop TM, poop trademark. I don't know why. I spend way too much time on that, to be honest. So we can place it down, and I've made a poop item, which I've also spent way too much time making this texture. Anyways, we can put poop in here. So this is the GUI I've made, and you'll see that just goes ahead and puts the correct value in there, which is fantastic. That's exactly what we need. So yeah, that's how you can basically sync an integer from your block entity to your screen. And in the next tutorial, I'm going to be covering the blip method, as I said several times, but I'm going to be using that to fill this bar right here with poop. As you do, you know, that's what everyone does modding for, right? To make poop. But yeah, we're going to be filling this from the bottom to top, of course. Something like you might use that for something like drawing a water texture. So say you are storing water in your block entity, you might want to draw a sort of bar of how much water is in there, or any liquid or whatever. I think you get the point. Or any progress bar, for example. We're basically drawing a progress bar. So if you ever want to make a furnace, for example, it might be helpful to know how to do that. But that will be the next tutorial. And yes, speaking of the next tutorial, that is the end of this one. So I hope you guys did find this tutorial useful and enjoy it. If you did, please do be sure to smash your face into that like button and subscribe. If you really enjoyed, please do be sure to share it. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next tutorial. Goodbye.
高端的食材往往只需要采用最朴素的烹饪方式。
忙碌了2个小时，陈师傅开始制作燕皮。肉燕形似馄饨，